Hi, my name is Hallie Gillespie. I'm a graduate student in the Masters of Science in Applied Nutrition at the University of New England. And today I'm going to be presenting a case study on nutrition care for adolescent obesity. Jane is a 14-year-old female. She's been referred to us by her physician because she was recently diagnosed with obesity. Her BMI is above the 95th percentile. She has a familiar history of obesity on both sides of her family, as well as type 2 diabetes and hyperlipidemia. She has a history of seasonal allergies, and her family experiences food insecurity, reporting that they often run out of food before the end of the month and don't have money for more food. So, what are the causes and risk factors of obesity? The causes of obesity are complex. It's a chronic disease with a complex etiology. It's caused by a combination of genetic predisposition and environmental factors. And some research shows that genetics accounts for about 40 to 70% of a person's obesity risk. In addition to the genetic factors, there's also a lot of environmental factors. And in Jane's case, these are having a parent with obesity. Jane actually has two parents with obesity. Experiencing food insecurity. So people who experience food insecurity are at an increased risk of obesity. Having a diet high in energy, fats, and sugars, which, as we will see, Jane has. And then a sedentary lifestyle. Obesity in adolescence increases the risk of many chronic diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, and orthopedic problems. Only 10% of adolescents with obesity are able to achieve a normal weight in adulthood. And obesity in adulthood, as we know, is associated with many adverse health outcomes. So let's look at anthropometrics. Jane is 157.5 centimeters tall. She weighs 69.5 kilograms. This puts her BMI at 28 kilograms per meter squared. And this is above the 95th percentile. It's the 95.5th percentile for BMI for age, putting her in the obese category. Her weight for age percentile is 93. Her stature for age percentile is 33. And over the past 6 years, she's been gaining on average between 4.5 and 6.8 kilograms per year. Her physician sent for some lab work, and so we see here that her fasting glucose was a little bit high. Her HDL cholesterol was low. Her LDL cholesterol is a little bit high, and her triglycerides are high for an adolescent. So her lab work is concerning for dyslipidemia and for insulin resistance. Looking at Jane's 3-day diet diary in Chronometer, she is eating on average 3,100 calories per day, 107 grams of protein, 107.5 grams of added sugar, over 5,000 milligrams of sodium, 45 grams of saturated fat, and having more than 25 fluid ounces of sugar-sweetened beverages per day. She did not meet the DRI for vitamin D, magnesium, or fiber. There is no agreed upon consensus for energy requirements for adolescents with obesity, but a calorie-restricted diet is often recommended. I use the Mifflin-St. Jean equation, which is actually a better equation for adults, but it usually overestimates the needs in people with obesity. I then subtracted an additional 200 kcal a day to give her a small calorie deficit. This put her needs at 1,800 calories per day, and I feel okay about doing this as a fairly conservative amount of calorie restriction because with adolescents, they're still growing and we don't want to interfere with their growth. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 25 grams of added sugars per day and no more than 8 fluid ounces of sugar-sweetened beverages per week. As you can see, Jane is also getting considerably more of those things, and she is getting more than the recommended amount of saturated fat and sodium. Looking at her anthropometric data, her lab work, and her diet diary, my top nutritional concerns for Jane are obesity, dyslipidemia and heart disease prevention, and insulin resistance and diabetes prevention. In adolescence, nutritional interventions for interventions for obesity should focus on long-term healthy lifestyle behaviors. Research shows that focusing on healthy behaviors instead of on weight loss results in less stigmatization and less stress to the patient, and actually results in better health outcomes. So, luckily, we can address all three of these dietary concerns with overall dietary improvement and increased physical activity. But first, really, Jane's family needs help addressing their social determinants of health. And the fact that they run out of money at the end of each month for food puts them at really high risk of a whole bunch of adverse health consequences, but obesity is one of them. And so they need to be referred to a social worker who should help them apply for income eligible and food assistance such as SNAP and WIC. They have a son who is currently 4, so they would qualify, assuming that they are income eligible. They should also be referred to local food banks. And then finally, right now they're eating out a lot, eating a lot of fast food, which is contributing a lot to the excess calories, saturated fat, added sugars, and sodium that Jane is getting. And so they should be directed towards resources for cooking at home on a budget. This could include the thrifty meal plan, but it could also include online resources for just cooking at home on a tight budget. So moving on to my nutrition interventions. My first recommendation would be to eliminate sugar-sweetened beverages. Sugar-sweetened beverages have been found to be particularly obesogenic and detrimental to insulin sensitivity. They're associated with childhood obesity, and Jane could eliminate 73 grams of added sugar a day if she cut out sugar-sweetened beverages. So this would get her much closer to the American Heart Association recommendation of no more than 25 grams per day of added sugar for children and adolescents. My second recommendation is that she should aim for 60 minutes of exercise each day. The Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans recommends that children and adolescents get 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise a day. Exercise can improve overweight in adolescents, insulin sensitivity, and it can improve HDL cholesterol. So all of those things would be beneficial to Jane, given her lab work and her diagnosis. And then finally, I would recommend that Jane start using the healthy plate method. This is because the healthy plate method can address overall diet quality without calorie or food group counting. It could help Jane to increase fruits and vegetables and whole grains and teach portion control. I especially like it for her family because it's pretty simple and it doesn't emphasize extreme restriction, which could increase the risk of disordered eating in adolescents. So here I made a sample 3-day menu for Jane. I won't go over every single thing on the menu. I did aim for approximately 1,800 calories a day. I'm assuming that she's eating lunch at her school cafeteria, and I'm hoping that they can start to eat more of their meals at home, so I have the other meals at home. It meets or exceeds all of the DRIs except for vitamin D, and it comes to within 90% of the DRI for iron. So for vitamin D, I'm actually going to recommend that Jane take a vitamin D supplement. Even with having her drink about 3 glasses of 1% milk a day, she still isn't meeting her vitamin D requirements. And vitamin D rich foods tend to be pretty scarce and pretty expensive. Things like eggs and salmon and fortified cereals that Jane's family may not be able to include in their budget. So I think it might actually be cheaper for her to just take a vitamin D supplement every day. In conclusion, obesity is a chronic disease with a complex etiology. Obesity in adolescence increases the risk of many chronic conditions later in life. A major priority for this case study is addressing the family's food insecurity by getting them connected with the appropriate government programs and food assistance organizations. It's very difficult for people to eat well when they're worrying about having enough food. Nutritional interventions for adolescents should focus on long-term healthy lifestyle behaviors, not exclusively on weight loss. And my specific recommendations for this patient are to eliminate sugar-sweetened beverages, get 60 minutes of physical activity per day, and to use the healthy plate method for meals. That concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for watching. Here are my references. Thanks.